This is The Poet and the Poem from the Library of Congress. I'm Grace Cavalieri. We're on location with Virginia Crawford and Sam Schmidt, two poets who are married. And we always like to start with an opening poem. So let's have a poem from you, Virginia. Shall I call you Jenny? Do people call
Usually,
you Jenny?
in my family and close friends, yes.
Well, I'll call you Virginia because this is a very
Poetry, yeah.
austere moment. Have a poem.
Okay. Thoughts on making soup and bore for Nefertiti and Imani. The potatoes, brown and beautiful and cool, wait in line beside my cutting board. I slice each into chunks, then slide them so many half moons into a boiling pot. The body of an onion beneath my palm, this raw material for cutting and using, luminous layers of white, the scent familiar, irritating. America has made me soft. My trash can overflows with food I cannot eat quickly enough while someone down the street goes hungry.
Mm.
Too many times I stop at a red light where a veteran lives, his warped cardboard sign held high, another flag he carries now, and I do not have an apple, a bed, a dollar bill to give him. How, how do we sleep through war? Like that day we saw the pairs of boots lined up, one pair for each soldier lost so far, each perfectly formed to the feet that used to sweat in them, an army of ghosts called to attention across the perfect grass. Then our friend said her middle son had signed up. Her face, her heart, all of her fell open. What used to shine there, now dark with love and worry. And I held her, and we cried. And she said, "Don't take my baby, don't send my baby to Iraq." She said it over and over, and we cried, our whole bodies shaking for our sons.
Virginia Crawford. Sam Schmidt, let's hear a poem from you, please.
Okay, this is an old one. Goes back to it's called How They Met, back to the beginning. The old story of true love found.
Mm.
She tells it again. Here is what he remembers. One evening he heard the knives rattle. Writing or watching TV, he could hear them in the kitchen. On sliding open the drawer, he could swear that bright gleam on metal was a grin. The grin seemed to say, "Good boy. You are so right to think you don't need anyone. Love us instead. Press us. Let us kiss your neck, your wrist." That smitten look. How many times had he raised it before like an arrow it struck? He remembers those days for the absence in them of fate, the memory of a stranger he'd spent time with, almost given up. To him, the miracle was how out of that stranger she began to emerge, a known and shining face out of formlessness. This woman who now stands beside him, calmly recounting a fairy tale, him nodding and saying, "Yes, it was just like that."
What a fine ending. It was just like that. As we were talking before we went on mic, we've met each other 25 years ago, maybe. And I think you were just married, and now you have two children in college. And poetry has been a stem cell in your marriage. So I just want to talk about that for a minute, how that is. And Virginia, I mean, here we have two life forces in one household. How does that energetically work? How does that, because those are passionate vocations. How do you see it working?
Well, we're lucky that we both understand and respect that. So when we know the other one is passionate about something and is working on something, we give them the space to do so.
And Sam, is there an advantage to someone who speaks your own language? Or, I mean, in my case, my husband was a visual artist, and I found his comments very helpful because he wasn't in my field. But to have someone speak your language, what does that mean to live together and to know what a poem is?
Well, I have to admit, I think that Ginny understands my work better than I understand hers. I think that very often I'm kind of stuck, and I think it's actually kind of annoying to her. I go to her and say, what do you think, this or this? You know, so I'm very down in the details. And then we also had do a workshop with Sherry Morrow, who is a wonderful writer and a very astute critic, and she's other people come and go, but we're kind of the core. We meet like once or twice a month,
Oh,
and she's always, and I'm glad that there's another person, because very often, like with the long poem in Ginny's book, uh, questions
Questions for one.
for water. It took me a long time to get on board with that one. And so I was saying, well, I don't know. It's like you're always repeating these colors, and there are all these different things kind of coming in and out, and um,
we
so
are both very different kinds of poets.
yeah,
Sam, you are very minimal, and I believe that Virginia is a little more lyrical. Not they're both lyrical, but I think she likes the long line, the prosody, and I think you have very crystal clear images. So we're going to hear a lot about that. And Virginia, just give us a poem. First of all, tell us what you think your work is about.
Oh my goodness. Being human, is the
Oh,
only answer, I think.
that covers a
Uh,
lot.
yes. Things that are uncomfortable, things I don't know how to deal with, things I wish I could change, but have no power in the world to do so, as well as happier moments.
That's interesting because it raises the point that poetry answers questions as we write it, and it sometimes solves arguments as we write it. And I want to tell everyone before you give us a poem, Virginia is a longtime teaching artist with the Maryland State Arts Council. And she has two books. Apprentice House Press did her full length collection, Questions for Water. And then she has a chapbook, Touch, Touch, which was from Finishing Line Press. And she has degrees in creative writing from Emerson and the University of St. Andrews, Scotland. Living in Baltimore, that's here, Virginia.
Night poem to my husband. I get up from the tangled bed and go outside, a bear leaving its cave, a hermit crab looking for its next shell, only to stand on the lawn, a simple person amid sleeping brick houses. If I were younger, I might be thinking about my newest lover, his cologne, or the smoke in my favorite sweater. But as it is, I'm simply aware, someone standing in the grass, sensing only the cold wetness of the grass and the breeze that stirs the tops of the trees. The cat has followed me out and stands a little behind, her eyes lifted as if she were wondering, what am I doing? What are those lights in the sky? And there was something else I wanted to tell you, something about the fresh peach comfort we share in our house. But now I am wondering if you are even listening and why I bother to tell you these things that will never make a difference. Unfinished sentences, crunched up leaves. But this is all I want to do. Tell you that down the alley a few rabbits were running. The sky was clear and high above me, and that at one point the moon, looking like a freshly peeled orange our girl would like to eat, appeared quite clearly from behind a thin cloud.
You know, you go a lot of places in a poem, and yet you hold it together. It has a real Virginia glue. But you really do. You go different places and you always pull it together. So that's a very different from Sam's writing. And Sam, how have you changed over a life of writing? Not your writing, but how have you changed?
Oh, how have I changed?
Yeah. As a writer. I mean, here you started writing 25, 30 years ago as a young person in college. And so now you're a father, much older than you were. How do you think that you have changed as a person as you've been writing these poems? If you have.
Oh, no, I haven't changed at all. No, but let me think. I think that one of the things that is something I've slowly come to realize is how important courage is. Because I just, it's like it's like I wasn't thinking about it when I first started writing. Oh, I'm sorry, our dog. Shall I just continue or shall I put her out?
No, let's go with the dog.
So it's like I think that very often, when you start writing, you're very outward focused, and you want,
Mm.
like what is the purpose of this thing you're writing? I mean, very often, I think that in the end, it's kind of the mystery, because you can, but you want it to be something easy to figure out, like you want to amuse people or move people. And it, and there's a part of you that's sort of, I guess kind of servile, that wants to fit whatever that notion is of how you think the poet fits in society. So I feel like I was very much, a lot of my work was, probably still is, who am I kidding, but was inhibited by that.
Well, we do want to please. I mean, we do want to be read. That's true. But as you say, courage implies vulnerability.
I
And
think I think so. I was afraid of the vulnerability, and in a
Mhm.
sense, I think that you gradually, you can please others at a superficial level if you have that direct, attempt to please others. But I think what I was trying to do in my most recent book was, damn all the expectations, what I think I should be. I'm going to walk into this darkness, and look for what pleases myself, what moves me, what is that core,
Mhm.
and to sort of look for that.
I
And
think that you have reached the place we want to be, the truth. It's called the truth. And I'd love to hear a poem from you, Sam. Um, I know you have two books out, Suburban Myths from Beathu Books and Dark Bird, Galileo Press. And that was just this year. So please give us a poem and tell us which book it is from.
okay, I'm going to read uh, Dark Bird, and this was the poem that Galileo Press published through their journal, Free State Review, before they even thought that they might be publishing my book. A man is looking inward at himself, seeing the forest of the inarticulate, those tall pines. His childhood was unremarkable. Why does it tower that way above him? Why, like it might explode? Why desire catching in his throat, the bite of persimmon he can't cough up? The old language of love, an underground river beyond the roots of his tongue. Why does anger say nothing? He dreams of children running through the forest with sticks, who strike the trees, shouting, "Wake up, wake up!"
Sam, you knocked me out. The forest of the inarticulate, that really, those little phrases of yours, your phraseology is so crisp that it creates a kind of a tension. You know, it wakes you up. Every line wakes you up because of the lengths of them. And I just think that is very characteristic of you. If someone, I think your line lengths create your mystery and your attention. Do you agree?
Well, yeah, I'm very focused on line breaks. As Ginny probably knows, I'll say, "Do you think it should be broken here or somewhere else?" And so, yeah, because there's so many there's so many possibilities in the length of the line or the shortness of the line, or if it breaks in one place or another. You know,
But it's so interesting that I picked that up in audio as well as I've seen your work on the page, but it really works in audio because your phraseology is riveting because of those line lengths. Well, I would like you each to ping pong for a poem each twice. That makes 4 poems. And I just want to hear how your themes clash or meld and how your voices are. And this is just going to be an experiment. It's sort of a lottery. So just let's get Virginia first, then Sam, and then Virginia, then Sam. And I just want to hear what I hear.
Okay. This is called Highway 101, and I think of it as the honeymoon. Highway 101. Our first week married, we drove south from Portland along the coast toward California. I remember the road winding in places, sitting beside you in the rented car, the sense of hours of road ahead. In California, we took pictures of each other beside the ancient trees. We looked so small, so inconsequential, framed in the viewfinder. Now I see you 12.5 years later, sitting up in bed, your back to the window, moonlight, so much moonlight through the open curtain. And it's Highway 101, full moon on the Pacific, everything blue black, bright white or sparkling somewhere between. We pass cities, farms, and cabins built into the cliffside, designed to withstand wind, erosion, time. I wondered what life would be like there, to wait season after season together beside the ocean, toast and raspberry jam, coffee to go with, the fog, and maybe a walk on the beach before we sit to work. We even visited the sea lions, saw their huge bodies on the rock ledge inside the cave where they winter. It was the first time I'd seen sea lions, their immenseness more like elephants than lions, almost covering the rock. From the highway at one point, I saw so briefly the most beautiful sand dunes, everything golden, the shapes indescribable, the curves of women too beautiful to exist. You drove us to Haystack Rock, described your childhood visits as I enjoyed an ice cream, something the shop called French silk, combination of several kinds of chocolate, to me so much paradise. We walked, me licking, you talking, and I thought of the highway, the way it runs so close to the edge, sometimes of the fog that blinds, but mostly of all that space we plan to cover, all the hours together in what might feel like a too small car. And out of all that, I might have feared, what I remembered was my sense of relief to be beside you. It was the first time I'd seen the West, my first time as a wife, your wife, and my husband, also a poet. We stopped to photograph lighthouses, tidal pools, the rocks and their barnacles, seagrasses waving, orange starfish relaxing, their legs thrown over each other. We passed the one good camera between us every few minutes, careful not to drop the precious thing it was. All these years later, I can't tell which pictures were yours, which mine.
Well, this calls for another poem about weddings, honeymoons. Hold on. This is from Dark Bird. The day we got married, the minister forgot about us. He had to be tracked down at a Chinese restaurant in Pennsylvania. No one was sure how to cut the cake. The temperature in the courtyard, 100 degrees. Your uncle, who taped the ceremony, kept veering the camera back to the attractive harpist. We departed to cheers, waving from my sister's red Citroen, the top open, standing. Our marriage that day was mostly sky, with the tops of a few trees. No minor impediments could stop us in our wedding clothes made of clouds and light. You imagined endless days, companionably by the sea. I could hardly believe my luck, joined forever with my best friend. Over time, the world grew up into that picture. Branches, trunk, the roots, the entire tree, the shape of the land. Oh, my dear sweet peach, you've learned how I can trudge along. I've learned how your shadow self can gleam, knocking over furniture, looking for ways to escape. Our marriage includes everything falling apart, the tree being bare, then thrusting out leaves.
Mm.
Sky is bright. Behind it, as behind a screen, someone is frying an egg, installing a shower curtain, laughing or talking too loud. Our marriage includes power lines strung everywhere, dogs barking in smoldering yards.
That was Sam. Here comes Virginia.
The white shirt. This morning, my son wore a clean white shirt to school. When I saw it, all I could do was hope it stays white all day. He tells me how after the announcement over the intercom, his teacher locked the door, turned off the lights, told everyone to remain seated, silent. My son realized he was closest to the door. Without mentioning the fear, he explained how he planned, if someone shot in the door, to shield himself with his binder and rush them. He heard the sirens arriving in 2 large waves, a few minutes between them, the loud reports of what he later learned were lockers being slammed shut. The email the school sent that afternoon explained there was talk of a gun. The police were called and did a thorough sweep. No gun was found. I keep thinking of him in that seat, his 14-year-old heart pumping with adrenaline. This morning, I got up early to hug him. I made coffee, asked him to take out the trash, pretending it was just Thursday. As he left for school, he turned and looked me in the eye. He was pretending too.
Everyone in this house is going crazy, my daughter says. When I talk with you, you turn the conversation. With Mom, we end up with Bernie Sanders. It's true, we're all obsessed. Her brother crouches before a digital Pokemon. He's written the ABCs of sheep. Singing floats from my daughter's room. Dad, she emerges to announce, we're forming a band. Ragged holes have been torn in our walls by the plumber. I stare through a gap in our bathroom closet into the living room, feeling the anatomy of this house. My wife laughs over some new post about Bernie Sanders. Has anyone seen my Bernie t-shirts? She asks. At the talent show, my daughter walks to the front, begins strumming. Humans are weird, she starts singing. Humans are queer. From the alchemy of her room, such tenderness.
Oh, well, I get a good taste of what you are. I think the sensuality of Virginia with her tastes and her smells and her looks at the ocean. And both of you have a very conversational approach to poetry. Virginia makes a lot of shifts and she can move geographically, which I think is really interesting. And Sam, you verge on surreality, and then you always come back to reality. You're just tipping on to surreality, and of course, the great irony that is underneath all of your words. And both of you then tie this tenderness at the end of each poem. Of course, domesticity would be in both of your poems as you share the same home. And very interesting in how Virginia encapsulated her son in that moment of terror. And then you present your daughter in her free speech. So both these are very autobiographical poems, but transformational is the way they become art. Don't you agree? You start with an ordinary thing. Well, I want to shift on to what you guys have been doing. And I know Virginia has been teaching and now is teaching elementary school children English as a second language. But when you were working with artists, Virginia, tell us about the agony and the ecstasy. I mean, here you have all these people who are inimitable, and you've got to teach each one how to be himself or herself. So, talk about what you're confronting and how you do it.
Oh, goodness. My favorite part about teaching other people to write poetry is their pride, and sometimes, or frequently, their surprise at their ability. Whether it's a classroom teacher who thinks, oh, Johnny is a terrible writer, he's not going to be able to do this. Or if it's someone else who's never tried writing poetry, an adult. But I give them exercises, very specific exercises. I used to lead people through sensory experiences, like to present a visual image and invite them to be there and write down details. What would you smell, hear, taste, etc.
Mm.
And then to use those to express themselves, to use the detail to express their own feelings. And they're sometimes people are just really surprised that they're able to do it, which I just find incredibly delightful.
Incredibly delightful. What a good way to sum up teaching. Sam has been of service in a different way for over 10 years, presenting the newsletter and presenting a series of poets in readings. What is the name of the newsletter?
Well, I did this in the 90s.
Right, for a decade or more.
Yeah, so the newsletter was called Word House,
Right.
and the reading series ended up being called Word House at the Minas Gallery, and it went through a lot of transformations. But it was a fascinating time in the Baltimore.
Yeah, you
Sorry,
both are
Baltimore.
Baltimore emblems. You really are iconic in Baltimore. But what do you think you got out of that?
Well, I think that I've come to realize I'm quite an introvert. And by actually hosting a reading series and doing a newsletter, I think I got to meet a lot of people that I wouldn't have, that I probably wouldn't have been able to, form friendships with otherwise. So that was a lot of it for me. And also uh, poetry was my passion, and I guess sometimes it starts out with this disappointment that that very often there doesn't seem to be a good infrastructure for poetry for people to
Mm,
write it and share it, and I think somehow people aren't somehow they don't get the training or the experience to appreciate it. Just I think it's somehow fallen out of being an everyday occurrence for many people.
I find it coming back, though. Um, I want everyone to know that your work has been published in many journals and that you've received 2 Maryland State Individual Artist Grant, and your master's degree is in comparative literature from Johns Hopkins. So, um, Virginia, I'd like to know finally what you think is going forward poetry would do with you or for you. What's ahead of you?
Oh my goodness.
Maybe another book.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, several. Um,
What do you
I
have a
have,
manuscript in process?
yes.
I've
Uh,
never known a poet who didn't.
yes. I guess about a year and a half or so ago, I started thinking about how my life might be different if I had made a particular decision differently, and all of the spectrum of other people I might have become from that point. And so I have imagined, what would have that life been? What would this life be? Et cetera, as if still myself, but it's like an apartment building of a different version of myself in each room.
That is fascinating. We're going to look for it. Sam, what are you writing?
Well, I've been trying to find the way into I was thinking of trying something a little more autobiographical. I mean, it's very autobiographical what I'm doing, but I started with uh I've realized I do best when I have kind of a central, like, meditative focus. Like Dark Bird I was focused on this tree that I went out and took a picture of, and that was my writing prompt for the day, whatever the tree looked like and whatever my feelings.
Oh,
And so I generated all the material for the book over the course of a year, and I made myself write something, and because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, maybe too much so, I would then make myself share it on Facebook. So
well, you know what William Stafford says, lower the bar,
yeah.
lower the bar. We'll get more done. Now, a final poem from each of you, a married couple who have made poetry their life and service to poetry their life. Virginia, let's hear a poem from you and then a final poem from Sam.
For the love of rhinos. It's all about being human. The music on the radio, symphonies, poems, every book ever written, photograph taken, lumps of clay spun on wheels, even the coffees brewed and handed to you by a stranger calling your name. It's all practice. So when you walk through the zoo and see the rhinos standing, snuffling the green weeds in their enclosure, you also see the precision of their curved horns, how their ears, edged with delicate hairs, swivel towards sound and then lay almost hidden against their necks. Look at the lashes around their prehistoric eyes, the softness in their gray skin, exposing those impossible bodies, all the layers of loneliness and earthly dust.
Beautiful. A final poem from Sam Schmidt.
This is a fall poem. The landscape drifts closer to what it was. The leaves still cling. A fat cloud hugs the horizon. Above it, cirrus wisps, tinged pink. The lawn in green and straw is dotted with graves. The crickets sing. Through them, you hear a foreground, a background stained with sound. A few leaves waver. A few have turned brown. At the end of the world, the fountain spits. Trees, houses, the outline of a city, hills, the harbor, clouds. Go back far enough, the background stops changing. If it did change, it would do it slowly, a deep color deepening. Cloud rivers motionless until you see them flowing, a pristine leaf showing a fleck. The memory of towers falling, people leaping from the fire, suspended more than 50 floors up, till the background is still wherever you go. The moon follows you as you drive. Rows of trees accelerate between you. Even when you're in a crowd, even at a party, the moon is nailed to the sky. You try to say the color of what's colorless, how stillness moves, how silence is a sound, a roar, how your time here goes by like the tolling of a bell in a place where no bell has rung before. A slow walk past the tree each morning leaves a residue like smoke that stays with you all day, flows at night into your dreams. The grass, the trees, the clouds are a cloak you can wear, nonchalantly like a medieval squire. It's a good look on you. The chirp of insects makes a strong, soft wool. The felt of what was felt. The turning leaves are brown threads. The cloak is also made of driving those twisty roads to work, hills speeding down to traffic lights, the urgent feel of disc brakes, take the fork upwards, shift gears, round the corner while the trees beside the road, the sky above the trees all shimmer. Then you're sitting at your desk in a cubicle, typing, talking on a phone, the sun shining through plate glass, the day inside you still moving, relentlessly forward, as if you're still driving, still talking.
Mm, mm. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Virginia and Sam. They are Baltimore poets and beyond. This is The Poet and the Poem from the Library of Congress on location. Our program is produced by Forestwood Media. Post-production by Mike Turpin, MET Studios. We wish to thank the Library of Congress for making the program possible. Funding is provided by the Ravada Foundation of the Logan family, Sci-Nippet Fund, Natalie Canavore, and Sandy Jackson Cohen. Mike Turpin is our beloved engineer, and I am Grace Cavalieri. Thank you.